Or
Well, I guess you can call it kind of any way you would like.
yeah,
Co-collections, co-designs, edits, collabs. Yeah.
yeah. I thought we already talked about it a little bit, but I want to deep dive and talk a little bit more. But yeah, let's start with that, like co-collab. Like, what is it even? Like, can you just give you an example? I know you have already worked at a fashion brand. Now you work with jewelry, and this is kind of your expertise. You've done it, and now you're doing it for the new brand, and that's why you're here because I want to learn a lot and want to know, the tricks and tips and just yeah how to kind of run it. But yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. Just like what is it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what is it? I guess you can kind of, as a brand, make it the way you would like it to be. So I think what first comes to mind for brands is a collection that you do with another person, but how you kind of create the campaign and the collection, that's kind of up to you. You can either design it together with someone, you can make someone the face of your campaign. You can make someone the art director of a collection. So, kind of, there are a couple of different ways to do a co collection. But I would say the most common way, as it's referred to, is a co designed collection. So, a collection that is created together with someone else.
Yeah, that's also kind of the understanding I got too. But what is so? I mean, obviously, this is something I know the fashion brand you used to work at. They kind of was maybe not one of the first, but that was like 5 6 years ago. Very common, like pretty unique back then. Now everybody's doing it. But what can you expect now from it? Like, why should you do it? Why should you even invest in it? Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, like the plan of it.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, especially at the previous company that I was working for, they were indeed one of the first to do it, and it was something very unique and different. And it was a way for customers or for ambassadors of a brand to kind of grasp a piece of the person that you aspire, or the person that you're following, and the
Mm,
person that you look up to. So when a brand then collabs with that person and create pieces together, it's a way to kind of become that person. And that's how influencer marketing grew big. And now many other brands are doing it. So the effect that you had, the FOMO effect, so the fear of missing out if you don't shop right now, it's becoming less. Doesn't mean that it's not as effective. It's just that the way you launch it and the way you create it is slightly different. Um,
mm,
at least that would be my recommendation, because people need a lot of trust, they need a lot of authenticity. So I would say really bring your audience with you on the whole process. That's essentially what people want to see. You can still make an aspirational campaign when you eventually launch the collection, but I would say that it's the behind the scenes that people want to see. People want to be part of the whole process because they're still interested in it, but not just interested in the outcome also. Okay, but how was this created? How was this made? What is the idea behind
mm.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. But so how do you, if you're a brand now, and obviously now when you start at your new company, what are the first step? Like, how do you even get started with all this? And yeah, tell me a little bit more about that process behind the scene. Obviously, that's very interesting. Yeah, tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I would say it's not just about collaborating with the right person, but it's also really understanding what do you want to get out of it. Is it sales or is it brand awareness? Um, do
Mm,
you want to tap into a different niche? Do you want to expand to another market? But it all starts by truly understanding who are you as a brand and where is your potential. Let's say that you are interested in expanding to another market. Does it even make sense to expand to that other market? And how does that market operate? So really understanding where are you now and where do you want to head towards. I would say it's the groundwork and something you should really understand, because if you don't understand your own brand yourself or what you stand for, how is someone else supposed to understand? how are you supposed to bring along that message? And then once you do
Yeah.
that, that's when you can start building on, um, yeah, scouting for the right partner and starting those conversations.
And how should you think then when you scout the, I guess, the creators, the influencers? How do you, like, what's the process there? Like, how obviously you find like how many meetings? What should be the timeline? Like, is this something you can do in like 3 months? What's yeah? Give me a little bit more details about that. Obviously, it depends on the product and the company, but like for a jewelry company, if you can take that as an example.
Yeah, for jewelry, it's much faster than it is, for example, for fashion. And the reason why is because the lead times are less. But that's only about the project itself because the negotiations can take up to a year. I have one partner that I signed before, and the negotiations took a year. And then you have a year long execution of the entire collection. So it really depends. Um, how do you get started was another question that you had. I would say it also depends on the company. If you start new, I would say go for your core market, the market that you know that works. You already have data and you already have relationships with some existing partners. So naturally that would be easier because when you do decide to launch a collection, you need to allocate a specific budget towards it to create the product. So a purchasing budget.
Mm,
And you need to understand what is the sales potential of that person. So, what is essentially the budget that I can set? And once you know that, you understand what's the potential um, campaign budget that I can set for that person. What's the fixed fee? What's the commission? What budget can I set aside for PR, for the shoot, and so on? Because I can imagine that for any brand, they want to profit out of it. So ideally, you sketch a profit and loss that becomes profitable, and it's guessing and it's estimating, but that's what you start with. Um,
mm.
yeah.
But when you then pick a creator, I think you mentioned this, like it does not make sense to pick someone that you have not worked with, right? Is it smarter to just pick someone that you know are already driving sales for you and I guess is aligned with your audience and pick them?
Yes.
Or yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yes, in a way, ideal case scenario, yes. But in some instances, especially when it comes to influencer marketing, the partners that you want to do a co collection with might not necessarily be the partners that you work with on a monthly basis. Because for influencer marketing, what in general sense works better is if you go deep into an audience, so you go more niched and more in depth. Whereas with co-collection, going a bit wider might actually work better because you work with this one aspirational person that everyone looks up to, so that the other one will naturally kind of follow. That's the ideal case scenario. Um,
Mm.
but you do have partners that can do both, that can and drive and add that credibility and
Yeah,
yeah, and basically make sales. But in ideal case
yeah,
scenarios, always safer to go with someone that you've already worked with, know that works, know what the brand values are. It's much more authentic, and authenticity is the key to everything, I would say.
yeah, yeah. But what would you say? So you talked about, or you mentioned like negotiating, it takes time, and obviously that is connected to your calculation. Like, does it make sense to buy, I don't know, 1,000 or 10,000 pieces? What type of what metrics do you need to collect from the creator to go back to your team and design team and make sure that everything hopefully will get profitable? Like, do you have like any metrics that you always need to check and get from the influencer, or in general look at your past collaborations, I guess, if you're gonna do a re work with them again?
Yeah, so I would say past collaborations always makes more sense because you already know how many sessions someone can drive and how many sessions come from which markets. In best case scenario, you work with discount codes because then you will know exactly what the conversion rate is of that person. That was very easy in my previous company, or more easy. And in my current company, we don't work with discount codes, so we really have to go off on our general conversion rate from our department. And if you then also know the amount of sessions that someone can drive, you can guesstimate how many sales that person can potentially generate. And if you then increase the amount of deliverables, which is part of your contract, you can guess what the person can sell. And then I would always say the conversion rates increase quite a bit. I wouldn't say double, but 2% extra you can definitely add, because people will be much more inclined to purchase from someone if it's their own than just a regular advertisement. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
And how can you, I mean, it's good to be a hard, tough negotiator, but you don't want to be too tough because it's someone that you want to partner up with. But how do you negotiate? What's the compensation model? Obviously, there's probably many of them, but can you give us like a little bit of like a breakdown? Like, how do you compensate them? What should a good deal look like that makes sense? And yeah, a little bit more about that, like the negotiating part. Like, how does that look like?
There are a couple of different ways to make sure that you also meet the creators or the agents' expectations, because if the other person also feels like they are part of this mutually beneficial contract, then they're also much more willing to go above and beyond. And ideally, in your contract, you add deliverables, but ideally, they do much more. So it's a
Mm,
good question because it is very difficult. And I would say some parts are not measurable because some parts are just an understanding of the industry. I would say, like, who adds like a specific credibility, like a brand value that you can't really understand or measure in data. And then another part is basically making sure that you cover yourself and at the same time motivate the other person. So if you work with a
mm,
commission model, make it attractive for the other person, but cover yourself that don't give commission over all time sales, because for the other person, it's also better if you sell out in 2 weeks or even
mm,
in 1 week or even in 1 day. So really motivate the person, like, if we achieve this together, you get this amount of commission, but we need
mm,
to sell out in this time frame. And then you can add a
mm,
minimum guarantee that, we're meeting you here, we're giving you this amount, but if you sell
mm,
more, you get more with your commission. And with some partners,
mm.
they're so big and they get so many opportunities, and in those cases you can do a combination. Maybe you do a fixed fee and a minimum guarantee and a commission. um,
Yeah.
you play around, basically. Yeah.
But what would you? What's the I guess maximum commission you should give? Like not over this because then it will kind of break the whole model. Or minimum. Yeah. What is a like a normal range? Would you say in these contracts in percentage?
mm, Good question. I would say above 15% is, I wouldn't
Mm.
do. Another recommendation is to exclude the taxes and your COGS, um, and your returns. Very important, especially
Okay.
fashion.
Explain a little bit. Okay, explain a little bit more about that. Just so basically only give commission on the actual profit, and then if they return products, you calculate that later, or what do you mean? Yeah, tell me
Yeah,
so I understand.
No, I would give it on GP1. So basically, all the costs that come after that, so your logistic costs, your marketing costs, sponsoring costs, yeah, basically everything else you still like take for yourself. So
Mm,
it's still beneficial for the other person, but I would always return the deduct the returns or set a time
mm,
frame. Like, hey, we will give you this commission and it's calculated on the sales made after 30 days, for example. And if
mm.
there are returns after those 30 days, because potentially your return frame is longer than 30 days, then that's your loss basically.
Ah, I
But
see, I see.
15% commission is really high. Really high. Yeah, I would say that's really
Okay,
high.
interesting. I thought it would be higher,
What did you?
but is that a comp? No, I thought like it makes sense to give 20, 30 just to give a great motivation and just explode the sales.
Well,
But I guess if you give them too much, it all depends on your own, I guess, gross margins and your profit.
yeah,
Like sometimes it just doesn't make sense to give too much because for every sale you will lose money instead. So I guess
great.
you need to be careful how much you give. But okay, so 50% is really good. Usually you put like a time frame. So during like the first 2 weeks or 30 days, they get the sales, but afterwards the company gets everything. I guess.
It's
But
true, but
yeah.
like generally you will have a lot of costs also because a lot of people will be working on these projects. So that's also another thing to really consider. There are a lot of people within a company that are going to have to work for you to be able to make this a successful launch.
Mm,
It's depends on how your company is structured, but it's a design team that's going to be included. It's going to be your operations manager that's going to be included. It's going to be the person that's eventually going to do the campaign. Then you need someone to actually arrange the campaign. The influencer needs to come to the campaign set. There are like so many external people that are included in that. If you want to do a PR event, um, that's also another thing that you have
yeah.
to do. Your marketing, who's going to create the ads, who's going to create the campaign page. There's so many people that are going to be involved, and if you add all of this also to your profit and loss, then there's not a lot of profit. I would say it's you should also see it as a branding campaign. It's
Mm,
going to support other aspects of your company. Will still
mm,
give you profit depending on the deal that you make. Um, but I wouldn't expect an insane amount. It's also
yeah.
branding that comes with it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a lot to consider when you set this deal.
Yeah.
But what would you send? So obviously you want to maximize the campaign and get as much sales as possible. There's obviously different ways to kind of launch this pre-launch and all those kind of hype and everything. But can you tell me a little bit about the different strategies you could do and use to maximize sales? Like what, based on your experience, what type of launches have you done? Pre-launch and the 24-hour sales, what everything you mentioned a little bit in our first call, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So for from launching a collection, we always had a couple of best practices that we would like tick off, and if they wouldn't be part of the launch, like we could see it didn't work as well or this didn't work as well. It also depends on the profile that you're launching with, because like I said before, it's really important that it is authentic to the person that you're launching with. But the pre-launch, it's super essential. So basically making people become part of this VIP area, the people that can order early. So still give them something unique and something extra. And then on the creator's profile, make them do a little Q&A where people can ask questions on the product material, why did we design this? Like maybe there's a personal story from that person that was included into the designs and into the campaign, and people want to know about that. um, just dropping other people that are also wearing the designs, like, oh, my best friends are doing this, or giving them options where to wear specific pieces, or how to combine them, and how to combine other pieces with each other. So really bringing them along and give them
Mm.
a lot of reasons why they should buy it, not just because it's pretty, but also like give them something to be part of something.
Yeah, kind of like building like a mini community, and yeah.
Yeah.
And but when you then launch, when you actually go to like the true launch date, I always see, when I see, well, oh, everything is sold out after like 5 hours, and you get the hype and everything. Is that usually planned, or is it truly like sold? Like, are there any tactics around that too, or?
Yes, I mean, ideally you do sell out and you sign another collection, and then that one you can do bigger and better. Usually I would also recommend to go small, especially with your first collection, to kind of like taste and feel and see. Another way, it could be a tactic that you use. So let's say that you want that effect of shit, they already sold out, because obviously the reason why you wanted this because then next time people want it even more. So you can kind
Mm,
of like fake it in a way where you launch with very low amount of quantities, and you sell out, and you reach out to some magazines, and you get some coverage from PR magazines and so on. And you get people tagging and like talking about you, and then a month later or a couple of weeks later, you launch another batch and be like, you asked
mm,
and we deliver. So basically you give them something, and then because everyone already purchased it, uh,
mm.
people will be like, oh, but if everyone has it, then I need to have it, because that's how we are as humans. We want to belong and we don't want to
Yeah,
be left out. So yeah.
interesting. Something I've been thinking about, and I guess the idea of like creators can be hard to work with sometimes. So I'm wondering, when you collaborate with them, like when you really, design the products and all that, how involved should they be based just on your experience? Like, yeah, how should that partnership look like to make it as efficient and successful as possible?
I would say that it really also depends on the profile, but never promise anything when you're negotiating, because you don't know what actually eventually will be possible. So that's one thing, just to cover yourself as a business and as a brand. Second part is make clear that it needs to be authentic to them, but also to you, but also trust them because they know their audience best. They have been in this industry for a long time. So really try to work together. So that's why the match and the choice of your partner should also be a good match, because otherwise it doesn't feel authentic, and yeah, it will not sell. Um, and I would include them, but I would add some terms into the contract that if that person is not responsive for X amount of days, that you have the power, so to say. It sounds a bit negative, but you have the power basically to make decisions. So those
Mm.
are like small things you need to add into a contract and into an agreement to make sure that those uncomfortable situations um, don't really.
Becomes a problem where yeah. I like that with the contracts. Any other like specific paragraphs or terms that is like, this is needed, because if you don't have it, it can be stressful, or any paragraph that you would like to have, but they will probably say no, so you can, negotiate around that. Like any term, like I think that term was really good, like having that if they are not responsive, you can, take your own decision and move on, because otherwise the whole project can, obviously get delayed. But yeah, any other terms that you have in mind?
There are probably many, but another one that pops up is to that you're allowed to reproduce the designs under your own name and not under their name, so that you basically own the design, and
Mm.
you can do whatever you want with it. Let's say you have a best-selling piece and trends forecast that it will be a good piece next year as well. Well, then you wanna relaunch it potentially in a different color or in a different material or something, but it would be nice if you could do that, and
Yeah.
yeah, don't have to pay commission over it, basically.
Yeah, I think that is super smart. Like that is something I can imagine some brands just forget, and then they are stuck with not be able to kind of relaunch it in that kind of pattern or color or yeah design. But what I'm thinking, like, if the whole launch is like hard to get profit from it, but it's a good launch to build brand and all that, what examples do you see out there where they use it but then profit later? Like I'm just thinking, like, do they do like ads afterwards, or what can you do around the whole launch to kind of recoup the investment as good as possible? Any tactics there that you've seen, or
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, you can always reuse content. It's another thing to add to the contract, that you also own the content. And you can always get some more engagement out of it into basically for your own social media. You could also do it for ads, but I would say if you sell out, then it doesn't really make that much sense.
yeah.
But another way where it kind of like returns to you is the branding aspect. Because if you work with a specific person that's so cool and aspirational, then you have other people reaching out to you to work with you for a better price potentially. And actually, this it's also how do you say this? Like a hypothesis, like you kind of like
Yeah.
this would happen. But often, especially when we launch specific names, people would reach out to us and be like, okay, no, this person wants to work with you. So in that sense, you save money potentially on other partnerships. And you can always share it as a branding, like this is what we did this year, or
Mm.
you reach out to a new partner and be like, these are our partners that we worked with, we launched this collection. And yeah, people will still talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So a lot of inbound, and then the ones that was hard to negotiate with will come back and maybe accept your deal.
Yeah.
But other, like, based on your experience, do you have any examples of like mistakes maybe that you have done, or just in general that you have avoided when it comes to setting up all this with CoCollab?
Mistakes. I wouldn't say mistakes, but there are a lot of learnings for sure. Some partners were really not authentic to the brand. And or there was not internal alignment. I think I need to phrase it like this, because you as a brand most often are very specific to what you want to send out and so on. But not every country, every market, every niche is specifically that. And it doesn't always make sense to try to like make one person one specific way, like change them
Mm,
towards your brand. It doesn't make sense. It's not authentic. And their audience is strong enough to purchase from you, because they have done it before. You have that proven track record of it when they actually are
mm,
authentic. So when there's like a mismatch in alignment, also internally, because this happened a lot, like there are many people that are on board of this, then yeah, it could be less of a good launch. Be very, very clear in communication, because you will come across um, points within your process where there comes a delay or there becomes something that is not possible, and then you have to communicate with that partner, like bring that partner also along for the ride, because then they get an understanding as to what the pain points are, why certain things are not possible, and you don't risk that eventually they don't care anymore and they don't push for you. um yeah, what are other, also something to really consider is that it can be a very long time frame, like a year from now, and you do work with people that are in the public eye, and you never ever ever know what is going to happen. um I have an example of signing a friend group, because yeah, it was just like there were 5 girls, best friends, and what's a better way to launch a collection than with all your friends together and do something unique, something
Mm.
outstanding, more that collectivistic culture, you know. But then they stopped being friends, so we had to be really creative, and one stopped, actually like really stopped, and we didn't launch with this person. um, but yeah, these things happen, and yeah, you set a specific budget for all of them. What happens with that? You know, like you also need to be able to not always be 100% according to the contract, and kind of like try to be
Mm.
flexible to have a good relationship. But yeah, definitely there are so many things that didn't go as planned, and
Yeah,
we learned from.
like with everything in the end. But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess contracts are good to have, but in the end, it's relationships, and if you do anything bad with these type of creators with a lot of influence, it can be really bad for a brand too. So you have to be careful, I guess. I'm now just guessing, but I feel like that's kind of what you said. Like, don't be collaborative, so everything ends up being
It can, like,
good.
you can really gain a lot of value through them, but it can also go the opposite way for sure.
Yeah. Anything else, like if you think of like founders, brands out there that want to get started with this, anything else you would like to share? Obviously, if they want the whole expertise, they can just contact you. But anything else that you think like they should know about if they consider even doing a co-collab or a collection?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, really understand what you want to get out of it. What's your vision? Have a realistic time frame as to when you start signing and when you launch. Don't expect the signing to come in 1 month. If you're lucky, yes, sure, but it's not the same for everyone. If you want to expand to new markets and you don't have a lot of experience in those markets yet, really understand that influencer marketing or partnership marketing in all markets is different. When it comes to pricing, when it comes to the way of negotiating, when it comes to them understanding the value of doing these collections, because it's not only for you, it's also for the other person a huge thing. um, yeah, and assign one person internally to take on the entire project, so that you have one project lead, so that it becomes a holistic approach, and not just like, oh, now this person is doing this and then now that person is doing this, because also for your partner, it's not a convenient way of working.
Yeah. And would you recommend, if you have never worked with influencers, maybe just one or two collaborations, would you recommend them to get started with influencer marketing and understand how it works before you even jump into co-collab, or can you just go straight away like, I just want to do a co-collab, skip the whole influence marketing? What would you say based on experience, and yeah, what's best there, would you say?
I would say it's tricky if you never worked with anyone before, because it might be more difficult to understanding dynamics, and also supporting the partnership, because you potentially also want to gift some products to the friends of that person, or other pioneers in the industry that are influential and can actually like help sell the products and the brand. So I would say it would be tricky. But if you've never really worked with people before, you can also try off small and do a small edit. Maybe you have a couple of products that are already launching, and you can kind of like sign that person to sell those products. So it can be like a
Mm,
similar contract, but it's not designed with the person, but it's more of an edit just to understand how is this working. Is this something that works well for us? What's the feedback of our customers? Uh,
mm.
yeah, I would say you can start without, but it might be way more difficult, I would say. And
Yeah,
expected,
yeah,
yeah. It's harder to create the hype.
yeah, yeah. I guess also you need some kind of following also on the social platforms. Like
Yeah.
if you just have like a few thousand, maybe it can be a little bit hard. So I guess already, yeah. But it's also connected to what you say. You need to know your vision and all that. And if you have already customers buying, you probably kind of understand your audience and who is your buyer. And based on that, it's obviously easier to find a good partner that can do the co-collab.
But I thought it was
Um,
interesting what you said because you mentioned you might need some kind of following on socials. It's true, but it depends. Like if you want to launch, like let's say you're a really old-fashioned family brand and you can still do a co-collection, but the way you would launch it would be very different. Maybe you would do it more through your existing customer base, or you would do it out of home. So yeah, I can actually imagine a lot of collections also where you don't have a social following, and in that sense, um, I believe then you don't need to work with influencers. But the influencer,
mm.
as we know it, and as we are talking about the social media influencers, then I would recommend it.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about, like, I've seen the classic brands out there, like the traditional
Yeah,
brands, where they only have like a lot of stores.
yeah.
Sure, they have maybe a following, but they're not even active on social media compared to like the brands you work at.
It's a
And
stigma.
they still launch, but they launch offline. Yeah.
Like local businesses and brands, they can still do some kind of co-collection. I see it actually all around me right now. Some smaller communities that are partnering with restaurants or cafes, and then they do some kind of merge together. Like it's really niche and really specific, super effective. I really recommend this for smaller businesses. um, but yeah, it's super relatable and super trustworthy. Everyone's talking about it. So yeah, depends on what your objective is.
Yeah. 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 But nice. This was fun. I feel like I can do a co-collab now
Yeah,
with a little bit of your help. But I hope our brands at least get an insight of like how it works, and hopefully you can get started with it too. But yeah, thanks for sharing all this and joining.
thank you. Thank you for having me.